soldier, barbarian, magician, thief, cavalier, and acrobat.
Who was that?
That was Venger, the force of evil. I am Dungeon Master, your guide in the realm of Dungeons and Dragons.
Hey, Rick.
What's up?
Roll for initiative. It's Monday Morning Directing. How you doing? This is Monday Morning Directing. I'm Hobo. This is Rick, and this is the podcast where we talk about movies when we have no authority to talk about movies. How you doing, Rick?
My arms hurt.
Great. So today we're talking about a movie from an IP that we hold very near and dear to our heart, and that would be Dungeons and Dragons: Honor of Among Thieves. It's a D&D movie, the first like good D&D movie I think ever, probably the first good like officially licensed D&D like movie or TV show or anything ever.
Yeah, because all there was before this was the 2000s movie and then the animated show from what, the 90s, the 80s?
Yeah. And then also you have the Critical Role Vox Machina, which is
Right.
It is based in D&D, but it is not like a actual like officially licensed D&D thing.
They can get away with it because it's his own world,
it's
right?
it's his own stuff. There's nothing owned by Wizards of the Coast that's part of Vox Machina, so it's just it's their own thing.
Yep.
Even though it is based off of a D&D campaign. I had kind of mixed feelings about this movie because you and I obviously are massive D&D players. I've been playing for like a decade, and we've played lots of D&D together. And so we both love D&D. We both kind of wanted this movie to be good. And I initially came out of it like thinking that it was like kind of shitty, and I still kind of think that way, but I think my opinion was very heavily tainted by the fact that within the same week I saw John Wick 4. Like I saw John Wick 4 before I saw this movie. And so John Wick is like, oh yeah, this is like, what it's supposed to be like when you go to the movie theaters, and like like John Wick 4 is a movie that, needs to be seen in cinema. And the D&D movie just isn't necessarily as good, um, but as I've had more time to like kind of sit on it, I've began to enjoy it more and more.
I feel the same way, except I liked it the first time, and then I saw it a second time, and I liked it even more the second time.
Yeah, that's
So,
crazy.
yeah, I actually really enjoyed this film. I think first of all, before we get into the specifics, we need to talk about the marketing for this movie.
Yeah.
That is some horrendous marketing. Like, oh my God. Like, watching the trailer, I'm like, this looks like just a bunch of, they're just ripping off the MCU. They're just going down that road, very like quirky humor, all that stuff. But
which they do, to be fair. Like
they
a little
do,
bit.
but it works in Dungeons and Dragons. It works because we all talk like that when we're playing the game. Wow, just an absolute failure on the marketing perspective, because I no pun intended, I have no initiative to go see the movie.
Yeah, actually it's very similar to another movie that we've talked about on this podcast, which is the Uncharted movie. Like
Right.
both of them, like their kind of marketing thing was, hey, just give us a chance.
Yep. And to be fair, I'm glad I gave Dungeons and Dragons a chance. I had fun with it.
Yeah, it was I think I might have liked it better than Uncharted, actually.
Oh, 100%. It is 100%. This league's better than Uncharted.
I mean, I am still of the opinion that this is not a great movie, but it's better than I thought it was going to be going into it.
100%.
So one thing I want to touch on that you were just talking about is the humor. Because I mean, obviously humor is super subjective. But I think that there were a lot of parts of the humor that were sort of so-so. but there were also a lot of parts where I was in my seat, like just dying laughing. Like it was actually genuinely very funny in some parts.
Yeah, I
Um,
it doesn't land 100% of the time, but
no,
for me it was still like, for me it was like 70% of the time, but I still had a blast. So many
yeah,
scenes where we just could not stop laughing.
yeah. I mean, and the like the two things that stand out in my head, and spoiler alert, by the way, we're gonna be talking about the movie. Go see it. Otherwise, listen at your own peril. But uh the paladin, easily the funniest character in the entire movie.
I thought his character was funny. I am actually glad he didn't become part of the party. I think he was there for just the perfect amount of time to kind of like give them advice and just come off as like a total like pompous ass. But like it would, I
It
loved
was it
it.
was weird because like he was kind of a pompous ass, but he like backed it up. So like you also like respect him, and it's
Yes.
like it's so weird. It's like which is it's good. Like it really feels like to me, right, to use like a D&D analogy, because that's the number one thing that I think this movie does really well, is that it kind of captures a lot of aspects of what a D&D story is typically like. Um, and so, one of the things that the paladin makes me think of is like it's that NPC that the DM has no idea that the party is going to grow so fond of, right? But they just, like, for whatever reason, the party just thinks it's like the greatest character ever. And like they want that character along, but the DM's like, okay, no, I gotta bring this guy out of the story, because otherwise he's going to become the main character. Um, and so it does a lot of things like that really well. Also, in terms of humor, the scene where the illusion magic starts to fail, and he starts
Yep.
like, he begins to like loop, and then he begins to melt, and his eyes are bugging out of his head. That was one of the funniest scenes in a movie that I had seen in a minute.
Yep.
um I was dying laughing. It was very funny. And don't get me wrong, there is still a lot of MCU-esque like humor that is just like, you kind of roll your eyes at it a little bit, but it's fine. Like the movie overall was
It's not there so much that it's a problem. I think those
yes,
moments personally are few and far between, but they're there.
they are there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that this movie really does well, because at its core, this is like a heist movie, basically. Like this
Yes.
is like if you knew nothing about Dungeons and Dragons, this would be like Ocean's 11 in a fantasy world. Which honestly is kind of the thing that like every D&D campaign has at some point, is like there's always a heist, whether the DM intends for the story to go that way or not. um there's always shenanigans, and there's always Rube Goldberg super complex plans to do these heists.
Right.
And that's something that this movie does incredibly well, is it captures that style of interaction within the party, where they combine their abilities in interesting and unique outside the box thinking type of ways, and they use that to achieve their goals. And that to me is the thing that this movie does better than anything else. It really captures that. That's the feeling of D&D that this movie captures. And so I give it all the praise for that.
Yeah.
Even though there are still a lot of other areas where this film is lacking.
Yeah. I guess in that case we can just go through the plot.
Sure.
So it starts off with we meet Edgin, what's his face? Edgin Darvis, who's in
Yep.
prison with
Chris Pine.
yeah, Chris Pine, with Michelle Rodriguez's character Holga, and they're both in prison, and they're up for, I don't know what the council of something is called.
It's basically a parole
Yeah,
hearing.
it's a parole hearing, and in there we kind of find out why they're in prison in the first place, which is Chris Pine is essentially trying to bring his wife back to the dead from the dead. Um,
Yep. which also, by the way, very D&D-esque
Yes.
backstory, right? Like all of these characters, very D&D-esque backstory. Also a very D&D-esque beginning to start in a prison, even though um, you know, it being a
Tavern.
movie, they don't yeah, if they had started in a tavern, it would have been like even more cliche.
Yes.
But prison is also pretty up there. Um, but they do a very good job early on of like getting into that kind of, it's almost a little bit campy, you know what I mean, because it kind of feels like it's uh almost like a little bit of an exposition dump where you just have like this backstory flashback type thing.
Right,
um
but it's
but
done
I
in a
think it
perfect
works.
context, right? That
Yes.
it's a parole hearing, so they want to hear his story. They want to see
Yeah.
why he did it and all that stuff.
And also in the context of it being a D&D movie, like that is very, it captures that feeling of D&D very well, that you have like, Chris Pine, go ahead and introduce your character, right? And he just goes on like this, big monologue.
Right.
um all of the characters are like this, by the way, or I should say most of the characters are like this. Three out of the four of the main party have like really good like backstories, and they have their own things going on, and they have their own little character arcs, and it's good.
Yeah, we'll get to it when we come across that character. I know who you're referring to.
Sure.
Um, so right there in prison, Edgin, Chris Pine, he gives his backstory. So they're all part of well, originally he's part of the Harper's Guild, the Order of Peacekeepers. And
Well, the Harpers is kind of it's kind of interesting because another thing that this movie does really well is that it's set in the Forgotten Realm setting of Dungeons and Dragons, and they do a lot of things pretty well. One of the weird things about the Harper, one of the things that I cringed at just a little bit was that he said that he was part of the Harper's faction, which is like, that's so like meta almost, because like no one would call it the Harper's faction unless you're referring to the game, right? um and like the Harpers are they don't explain it in this movie, and it's not relevant for this movie. But like the Harpers are a very important faction in the Forgotten Realms setting, and they're sort of like a group of usually like bards and rogues, and they're a secret society that is using like manipulation of information to keep the peace, and be like a force of greater good, almost like a James Bond-esque fantasy MI6.
yeah, so Edgin's giving his backstory. He and his wife, someone, no name, I don't remember. They're
Uh,
living happy. They have a kid. And
yep.
then what happens is in the story, Chris Pine arrests a red wizard. He comes home one day to find out that the red wizards have murdered his wife, but uh, the daughter was hidden in a secret compartment.
This is one thing though that I think that the movie like kind of mishandles is there's a lot of like glup shitto type things going on if you don't know
Oh,
D&D, right? So
100%. Yeah, like they name drop shit and it will go past your head unless you have played the game.
they're like, oh, he's a member of the Harpers. What the fuck is a Harper? Like, oh, his wife got killed by the Red Wizards. Who the fuck are the Red Wizards? Like, it's
Yeah,
like there's so much stuff that is like um you know I know the D&D lore a lot, so I understood everything that they were trying to set up, but I'm like, if you're not like someone who's familiar with the D&D lore, and especially the Forgotten Realms lore, because there's a bunch of D&D worlds, um like what are you doing? Like well, it feels like it's a lot. Like it's just like you're getting name dropped on all of this like stuff that the typical viewer just like, it's just techno babble, really.
it is,
um
but they do take their time later on in the story to kind of flesh out, what's the Harper's Guild, what's the Red Wizards, what's their deal. They do. It's not like you'll be lost. You will not be lost in this movie if you're a
Not
newbody.
entirely,
You
but
might you
like,
might feel a little bit bombarded, sure, at
but
the beginning, but I don't think you'd be lost.
I don't know. They just name drop like Neverwinter, right? They name drop Neverwinter and the Lords of Waterdeep, and like
Yeah.
all of these other um and like Thay and like all of these locations and all of these characters and all of, you know what I mean? It's so much for someone to take in, especially if they don't know the 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 world at all. I It's hard to say because you and I obviously have enough knowledge of the game that didn't affect us as much.
Right.
But I'm sure that someone who had no idea like anything about D&D other than it's like a fantasy role-playing game, you know, it'd be too much. Like it's a lot. And I don't think it was necessary for them to like name drop all of this shit except for just to like for the D&D nerds. Um I really think that they could have like maybe you know, say that he's a harper and like you know I don't know, like they could have introduced all of these elements a little bit more slowly, because in this very opening like bit where they are in prison and then they escape from the prison, you're just introduced to so much stuff going on all at once that it's overwhelming.
Yeah. I
um
like to think that's also representative of like, hi, my name is blah blah blah, and then like the character will just, or like a player will just give a very convoluted backstory and then like sit back down. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, I mean, true, but that's not like I don't know, like that does happen in D&D, but that's not something that you need to bring into the movie. You know what I mean? Because I think that ultimately makes the experience worse for someone who isn't going to get that. You know what I mean? Who isn't going to get that it's a D&D thing. You know, I mean, honestly, the goal for these movies, like, and even for me, like as someone who's like a hardcore D&D player, the goal for these movies, you know, as much as they might have things for D&D players, ultimately, I think the real goal should be to introduce the IP to people who don't know anything about D&D, and it should be for everyone and for people who don't know everything about the lore.
Part of their backstory, while Edgin is explaining, is that Sophina and Forge meets a red wizard named Sophina and introduces her to the group, and tells them that there is a tablet of reawakening that can resurrect Edgin's wife. So he goes on the heist to go steal it. Everything goes wrong. All of them get caught except Simon, Forge, and Sophina. And that's where we run into the first thing that kind of took me out of the movie, and that is the special effects.
Yep,
Holy shit, there are some terrible effects in this movie.
it's really bad.
Really bad special effects, really amazing practical effects in this movie.
I think that the animatronics for like the Aarakocra and the Dragonborn are like they're fine, but they do look a little bit dated. Like they look like they belong in an 80s movie, like in Conan the Barbarian or something. Um and the CGI for especially the first half of the movie is horrendous. It's so bad.
Yep.
Like the you know the first thing that we see in the backstory is like Zofina shooting like lightning out of her hands, and it's just like, oh my god, it's so terrible.
It is pretty bad, and it doesn't get better until definitely the second half, because obviously, you know, the big climax of the movie, you can't have that
Yeah,
looking garbage. It looks
yeah, it looks
passable
better.
by the end of the movie, honestly.
But like, I mean, the thing that we talked about after we saw the movie, because you know, we saw this movie in theaters together, and the first thing that we talked about was how terrible the halflings look. Oh my god,
Oh, yep.
why? Like it was literally just they took him and they scaled him down. It's like, how did they make it look so bad when Lord of the Rings was able to do that like 30 years ago already? Like that's nuts.
It doesn't even seem like that hard to do. You'll need a stunt double for sure, for like how they did in the movie. There's like they have a short person there when it's with human or men or elves, you know.
Yes.
And then when it's back to like shots on them, they'll have the regular actors playing the halflings, and then they'll have just really tall people playing the regular characters to kind of give that illusion.
Yeah, but I mean, but we
They
know
did
that
not do
like
that
but we
here.
know like how to do it, and we've known how to do it for a long time. Why didn't they do it? It's like it's so bad.
Yeah.
Um and like there are a lot of effects for a lot of the magic and things like that, like, and when they escape from the prison, and they grab the Aarakocra and they're falling down, and it's just like, oh my goodness, it looks
Al-
terrible, and it really took care of
Albeit
me.
it is a really funny scene though.
It is a good scene, right? But the effects are terrible. Like the scene was good, and that scene again, very D&D, right? It's like they hatch their escape plan, and then the parole hearing council is like, wait, but we approved you, like you didn't need to do that.
Yeah.
Um, and it very very funny.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, and so the effects were really bad. Um, and like the characters as well, as we move on, because they begin to like assemble their roster, their party. um I think that Holga, Edgin, and Simon are all good characters.
Yes.
um but the fourth party member, and like the last party member, is the
Doric.
tiefling druid. Yeah,
Doric.
Doric, or they say tiefling. If I'm not
Tiefling,
mistaken,
tiefling, whatever.
yeah, if I'm not mistaken, both are considered the correct pronunciation. I will say tiefling, even though most people will say tiefling.
Yeah.
Um, Doric is kind of like,
Shoved to the side a little bit.
definitely.
It doesn't have anything to do with the actress. It's purely on a writing thing. They don't really give her
Yep.
much. Like at the end,
Nope.
like her entire character journey is I don't like humans, and then by the end of the movie, they're not so bad. Like that's kind of it for her character. And it was surprising how little they gave it considering she is a tiefling.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, there's so much to do there, which is why I'm thinking if they end up making a sequel, she would be a more focal character because there could be a huge story there.
Yeah. I mean, because the thing is that, like, the way that they essentially write Dork is that she's kind of the stereotypical elf, right? Where it's like, oh, I live in the forest and commune with nature, and you humans are so barbaric, and and then it's like, oh, maybe you humans aren't all bad, but she's still like snubbing her nose at them, right? Even though
Yeah.
that's not how she is like throughout most of the movie, right? That's kind of like the arc that they're trying to go for. When uh it was kind of weird because I know that she didn't have a lot to work with, but the way that the character is portrayed, she doesn't seem to like actually mistrust like the rest of the characters, because she goes along with everything that they
Yep.
want to do, right? She's like very on board for someone who completely mistrusts all humans. And like you seem to trust them a lot for someone who mistrusts humans. It's like enough that you're like willing to risk your life for them. Like that's crazy.
Yeah.
um but one of the things that, again, if you don't know D&D, a tiefling is a usually the child of like humans or elves or some other what in D&D is
It can
called a
be
race,
it
but
can be any race, right? A tiefling
uh
can be any race.
yes, but it's almost always humans.
Okay.
But tieflings are basically humans that are, through a recessive like trait, um influenced by magic from the nine hells. So they are, the horns and the tail that they get are demonic in nature. And even though they're a normal person like anyone else, their physical appearance is changed by magic that is deemed to be evil, and therefore they're persecuted for it. And that would have been an amazing angle to take the character on, right? Like show her backstory of just like her being persecuted for just the way that she was born, and have that be the reason why she mistrusts humans, because they react with violence and prejudice for something that she never even did. um like
Yeah.
that's a great character, but they don't do any of it.
So I will say one thing. Can you also become a tiefling if you have like one parent that is a like a demon and then one
um
parent that's a human? Is that how that works as well?
Kind of. It's Tieflings are kind of like weird because it's a thing where um the lore is intentionally vague to allow the players to kind of make whatever they want to make. But in most of like the Forgotten Realms things, uh it's implied that if you're a tiefling, one of your ancestors very, 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 very far down the line was probably like a demon or a devil or something like that.
Okay.
Um and like the way that I've done it in my campaigns, as you know, is that we've had characters that are half demon, half human, and I
Right.
use a tiefling to represent that. But in this, what they're going for is the thing that I was talking about before, where
It's a recessive like gene or something.
yeah, like their parents are human and their grandparents are human, but somehow through a twist of fate they come out with horns and a tail. And although not in this movie, in a lot of the like D&D things, they also come out with like red skin or like cloven hooves or wings or things like that, right? They look demonic in nature, even though they're not demons, and it's simply physical. Um and tieflings to me in the context of the role-playing game offer a really good avenue for that style of character, right, where they've been hurt before and they need to go through that character arc of beginning to trust people.
I
um
will say, you know what, for Dungeons and Dragons, I do notice a very distinct lack of prejudice in this game, or in this movie. You know, they really kind of just hate the red wizards and like everything else goes, at least from what I've seen. I'd like to see a little bit more, tension. I mean, they kind of do that
See,
with the forest people and the kingdom, kind of, but that's more said and then referenced once at the end. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, the thing about that is that this is a decision that comes probably from Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast. Um, in most official things, Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast have been trying to uh, what's the word? They don't want to have any sort of problematic view on what they term to be races, because that's an antiquated term that was used when the game was created in the 70s. What they really mean is species, but what they don't want is people conflating like, oh, they don't want people conflating these fantasy quote unquote races with actual real life ethnicities. And they are straying away from depicting that, for better or for worse. um and because there's a lot of debate on this right now within the D&D community about whether that's a good thing or not.
Right.
But the Hasbro wants to uh make a like in the Forgotten Realm setting and things like that, they in general they are trying to steer towards a type of setting where you just have like a bunch of different fantasy species that all just kind of like get along, and they're all just like in a big melting pot. And again, you can debate until you're blue in the face whether that's a good thing or not. And I personally believe that whatever Wizards of the Coast does, it doesn't really affect anything, because there's still going to be those types of stories, right? In D&D or not. Um but I don't think that this movie necessarily needed to have that type of story in it, aside from Doric as a character. Like I don't think you needed to see like a tension between elves and
Oh,
humans.
yeah, that would have just become too much, you
Yeah,
know.
I think Doric is the only part where it would make sense. And honestly, like the way that you would depict it wouldn't even be implying that Doric is of like a different ethnicity. It's just that it's a physical mutation that she's persecuted for because it's deemed to be quote unquote evil, right?
Right.
Um, and so uh, you could still have that without necessarily touching on race issues, which would be a fucking massive can of worms. But yeah, I mean, I think there was a massive, massive, massive missed opportunity with Doric, because um like she really doesn't have an arc at all, and that's so disappointing because like
Everyone else has a really good arc. I mean, I'll say Simon Omar. I don't know how I'm saying if
yeah, I think it's Omar.
Omar, a descendant of a famous wizard. You pointed that out to me.
Yeah, it's odd because uh Simon is, if I'm not mistaken, they said that he's a descendant of Elminster,
Right, yeah.
which would mean that he's a descendant of a god, because in the D&D lore, and this is something that again like the average person wouldn't understand, but in the D&D lore, Elminster is the wizard mortal avatar of Bahamut, the god of dragons. Um which is like kind of nuts if he's the descendant of Elminster, and so maybe in a future movie they'd touch on that and
Right.
like, oh, he's a demigod. Um but
But
you
he
know,
has a phenomenal character arc. I mean, he's
yeah.
super unconfident. He's not really great with the sorcery. And by the end of the movie, he's you see it. It's not like a flip of the switch thing. He is actively trying
Yep.
through the movie, and he gets it at the end. He becomes more confident. He's much better
Yep.
with his magic.
Yep.
Chris Pine's character, his entire thing is admitting that this entire situation is his fault.
Yep.
Olga is trying to find some closure with the romance that ended her connection to her family. I'm like, that is some good stuff like there.
Yep.
I really liked it. The paladin has no development whatsoever, but that is perfect for his role in the movie because
Yes.
he is
Yes.
not part of the gang, but he's kind of there as like a guiding. He's kind of like Gandalf. Like he kind of like pops in,
Yeah,
helps them,
he's
and
the
then leaves.
Obi-Wan. He's the mentor figure.
Yes. Hugh Grant, I don't really know if he has an arc per se. He is just a dick.
He's the antagonist. He's the villain.
He is one of the antagonists and plays it pretty well as a scheming con man. And then we get to the big antagonist, the Red Wizards of Thay,
Yeah.
which I thought were meh. Like they were whatever for me.
Yeah, they're a very I don't know. It's very difficult because like you know that they're like a dangerous threat, but it's you don't really get to see like why the Red Wizards do what they do. Like it's such a comic book esque
Yes,
like,
generic bad guy doing bad
yeah,
things, the twirling mustache. Like
yeah,
they want to expand their power past Thay is kind of what we're given, and then I'm like, okay, that is
yep,
very bland. There's nothing there. Um, there is Sophina, who is the big bad of the movie. There's another red wizard that she is working for.
all you need to know is that she's working for the Red Wizards, and the Red Wizards
Yeah,
are like that's the faction.
right.
Most of the characters aside from like the Red Wizards, I guess as a whole, and then Doric are solid. And yeah, and so like one of the other things as well that I will actually give this movie a lot of credit for is that the action scenes were really really good.
Right.
um like the basically any scene that Holga is in is where she's fighting, it's excellently
I
choreographed, like,
think it's also just a testament. Like Michelle Rodriguez, I did not expect her to
yes.
be so good in this movie, but she is phenomenal in this movie.
Oh yeah, no, she was my favorite performance of the entire. I mean, even though like the Paladin is a great character, I think Michelle Rodriguez was. I mean, she was funny. She was able to like. I mean, her obviously her work in the Fast and Furious movies like gave her the skill set to be so good in the fight choreography. But
Right.
oh my God, like the choreography was really really good. Um, and honestly, you know, most of the time I don't think I would say this, especially given that it's a heist movie, right? But like, I actually think I would have liked to have seen a little bit more fighting. Like, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more combat because, like, because it was really well done.
Yep.
Um, and you know, one thing that I would definitely change about the movie, one addition that I would make is that what we see at the very beginning, right, is mostly just like Holga kicking ass, and then like everyone else is kind of incompetent. And then in the very end scene, they all combine their abilities and they work together to defeat Zofina, right? And again, very D&D esque. But I would have liked for them to have gradually gone from like they have all their individual skills, and then they combine their skills like in a middle fight scene, right? And then in the final one, like they're completely synchronized like they are, and it's and it's big and it's flashing, and it's so cool. I don't There's a lot of things in this movie, if we're talking about the action as well, where like we get to see a lot of things that are like you can tie them to mechanics in the game.
Right.
So like for an example, like almost every spell that they use isn't just like, oh, it's magic. Which is something that's also like really funny about this movie, is that like oftentimes like the rest of the party's like, hey Simon, go and do a magic to like help us, and he's like, that's not how magic works, there are rules to this.
Yes. And then which
And
actually leads to my favorite scene, which is the graveyard scene. Absolutely.
yes,
That was one of the funniest scenes in the entire movie.
yes,
I forget he's casting Speak with Dead, right?
yes, he
Yeah,
is,
Speak with Dead.
which is a real spell from the game, right?
Right.
Basically, every spell that they use is a real spell from the game. And whether they like reference the spell or not, like like there's the fight where Simon and Zofina both have like the hands that are fighting, and that's Bigby's giant hand. You have Zofina casting Time Stop, which is a real spell. When she's about to kill Chris Pine's character, and she her finger grows dark, that's a Finger of Death, which is a real spell. Every spell that they use is something that's actually from the game. The Displacer Beast as well. Displacer Beast is a real monster from the game, and they used its actual abilities, which is the fact that it can create like an illusionary clone of itself.
Right. One thing actually, you were talking about the Displacer Beast reminded me that um, the other characters in that tournament or in the fight, those are just the characters from the animated show.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That makes
I
sense.
saw it again on YouTube. Someone sent me a link. It is just them in the exact same costumes, and
I
I
see.
thought that was kind of like a neat little thing.
Yeah, a good
Yeah,
nod.
good nod.
Um, but like even down to in the final fight when Zofina animates the dragon statue, right? Um, so Zofina like animates the statue, but like one of the things that's a D&D mechanic is that if you cast a spell like that, you have to maintain concentration, which means that if you get hit and you take damage, you lose your concentration on the spell, and then the spell stops. And what you see is that while the animated dragon statue is going after Edgin, the rest of the party is trying to just hit Zofina once to make sure that it breaks her concentration. And it's very subtle, and if you didn't know D&D, you wouldn't pick up on it. But that's the type of thing that I think was good for you're appealing to the D&D audience while not taking anything away from the general audience, because to a general audience it's just a cool fight scene, but to the D&D audience you see the intricacies of the fight the way that it would play out in the game, and it's really cool. I liked that a lot. I thought that was one of the most interesting implementations of like a reference to D&D in the entire movie.
A sequence we were talking about after the movie that I wasn't the biggest fan of was them in the Underdark,
Yes,
and they fight a very fat dragon, Themberchaud. And I just looked this up. That is an actual dragon in
in the
Forgotten
Forgotten
Realms
Realms.
that is overweight.
Mm,
So I did not know anything about this. I will say it shows no sign of intelligence whatsoever in terms
yes.
of like that's what I like so much about dragons is that they can cause so much destruction, but they have intelligence. You can talk to a dragon.
Yeah, especially in the D&D universe. Like dragons are like not just like wild animals. Dragons are actually more intelligent than the average person because they live for thousands of years. Um, and yeah, I agree. That was very disappointing to like not see. I mean, that doesn't even have to take away from the fight scene, right? Because obviously you got to have a dragon in the Dungeons and Dragons movie. Like I think that's completely fine.
Right.
But like my issue is that like they he's just like this force of nature that they have to outrun, instead of like having him be like this cocky, like you mortals dare enter my lair, like that sort of like he doesn't feel like villainous. He just feels like a big chunky boy who's chasing them throughout like this cave. It's like it's so weird.
Yeah, I would have thought a dragon would have had more focus, but he's kind of there for his segment and then like never thought upon again.
Yeah, the way that I would have done it personally is you go through it as normal, right? But up until the end where he gets his head stuck. Um and then you could make it like a bit of a surprise to the party and also potentially the audience where like he starts talking and then he's like, and like maybe like they can reason with him instead of like fighting him,
Yep.
which would be a very like D&D-esque thing to do as well, right? Like um where he's like, you came into my home, you started killing people like on my doorstep, like and you expect me not to, and they're like, hey, my bad. You know what I mean? Like I think that would have been like comedic. It would have been I think it could have worked. And I think uh that said, I understand the importance of that scene
For them to get the
Edgin.
or I thought you were referring to Helmet of Disjunction.
No, I'm referring to like Edgin's thing where because his role within the party is kind of questioned up until that point.
Right.
Like what is he bringing to the table? And that's the first point where we see like that he hatches an escape plan, using the rest of the party's abilities, and that he's like kind of the brains of the operation, right? And so I understand the importance of that scene. But yeah, I don't really like the way that they use the dragon. And I also don't really like the way that they use the Underdark, because the Underdark has so much potential as a setting. So much so that there are entire D&D like campaign modules that are set entirely within the Underdark, because it's like this massive underground ecosystem. But it's fine. It is what it is. It's definitely something that I would change, but it's not the worst part about the movie.
Right. Yeah, we touched on this. Really, the my biggest peeves about this movie was Doric's character feeling like nothing. Um, and then
Sure.
probably the Red Wizards just like being bad for bad's sake. I'd like a little bit more, development there. What are
Yeah.
they doing specifically? Like,
So I will admit that like my knowledge of the Red Wizards lore is not like the best, but in some of the campaign modules, what you see with the Red Wizards is that there's a lot of there's a lot of them that are kind of like almost like a mad scientist type thing where they perform like these unethical magical experiments on people and on things just to kind of see what happens, and they're like pushing the bounds of magic in a way that is entirely like unethical, and like it's obviously evil and it's obviously harmful. But it would be kind of interesting to see like a little bit of like Zofina, like I don't know, maybe conducting like magical experiments on like a displacer beast or on like a person or something where um like you can see that it's like this perversion of like the desire for knowledge, and you turn her into like this again, still very very evil, like not even morally ambiguous, or like there's still no sympathy to her, but at least give her that thing where like you can kind of see that she's insane. You know what I mean? Like she's a mad wizard who is uh like just the power that she has, and like the disregard for human life like overcomes her, and that's why she's like doing this thing, and that's why she wants to expand Thay's influence so that she can continue to conduct that uh those evil experiments, right? um
right.
Again, kind of comic booky, kind of cartoonish, but at least it's better than like, oh, I'm a wizard and I'm going to turn you all into undead. But yeah, I think that one of the things too about this is that there is opportunity for sequels, obviously, especially given how successful this movie has
Oh,
been.
it is. Yeah, it's already confirmed. There's going to be sequels. There's going to be a TV show.
TV show. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it's there's going to be a lot of stuff. If they do what we said and they focus more on Doric in the sequel, it should not focus on Edgin again. Because I think
Yep.
if you're going through a mainline series with the same cast, it should shift focus.
Yep.
It has to, if it shifts focus on Doric a bit more, I think I could forgive this movie a little bit more. I'm like, okay, she gets
Agreed.
more development later. That's
Agreed.
fine. Um, as long as they do that and have interesting villains and have a beholder, I do need to see a beholder.
Yeah.
I do want to see just like a paranoid schizo just like run around. That's gonna
Well,
it'd be very fun to see.
that's one of the things where uh I think there's a lot of potential for the sequel because they briefly mentioned the Lords of Waterdeep, and one of the things in Waterdeep is Xanathar the Beholder is the head of the Thieves Guild in Waterdeep, and so maybe they go to Waterdeep and they interact with Xanathar the Beholder. Beholder's obviously probably the number one most like influential monster that comes from D&D originally. I mean, Mind Flayers as
Right.
well, but I think the Beholder is above Mind Flayers. And Beholders, I love Beholders. They're very interesting. Their lore is super super cool. Um, but yeah, I mean, like, and Xanathar is an interesting character because he's like this super paranoid like crime lord who also has a love for his pet goldfish, which is he's a comedic character that's also very threatening. Um, and so I think he would be really cool. Um, the thing that I wonder about is if the movie is going to be another heist type movie. You know what I mean? Like in that same sort of
Right,
style.
because there is the water deep heist module, which
Yes.
I don't know if they would. I I'd assume they want to steer in a different direction. I don't know if it necessarily there could be a heist portion of the movie, but I wouldn't
Yeah.
say it would be like a heist movie like this
Yeah.
one is. Yeah, definitely like a heist segment. They need to get something and they run into Xanathar would be something.
Yeah. The thing about D&D is that there's so many like avenues for storytelling, even while using the same characters, right? Because like even while most D&D campaigns will have like at least like a small like a session or an arc that is like a heist. Like there's a lot more. Like sometimes there's you could include Game of Thrones as political intrigue. There's like sometimes just like dungeon delving action. Like there's so much things that you can do using D&D. um and I think that they're going to keep the same characters. I know that we have friends that were talking about how they would have liked to have seen um a D&D movie that's set in the same universe but like following a different party. I don't think I would agree because
Because I feel like we'd just be retreading a lot of the same ground.
yeah, yeah, and there's not really a whole lot of point to bringing multiple D&D parties together in an MCU style crossover.
Because they plan on doing a live action series, which has already been ordered by Paramount.
Oh, interesting.
Eight episodes, and then there's going to be the movie series. I'd assume they would follow different characters. Like the movies would obviously focus on this group, and maybe the TV would follow on like another group. Maybe
Honestly,
I'm not
like
sure.
I mean, this has opened the doorway for like a lot of D&D um branded like things, right? Like you can have any number of movies and TV shows that are about all of like these different like characters in these different settings.
Right.
Because D&D by its very nature is infinite. Um and so who knows? Uh
Who knows?
the
But I hope they take they don't let the success go to their heads because this movie is making it is almost broken even already. It was a
mm,
150 mil budget. They've made I think 125. Yeah, 125 million back. It's getting rave reviews. I don't think it's that good of a movie. I'm not
no.
thinking it's definitely it has some work to be done that can be fixed in sequels.
Yes, they need to work on the special effects, and I also think that like the
Just
this
develop your
movie,
characters, work on special effects. You're halfway there.
yeah, and another thing that I think you're right that can be like maybe helped by sequels is the fact that this movie was very very fast paced. Like
Right.
they hit a lot of like locales and a lot of story beats that they just kind of blaze through without like without a whole lot to them.
Yeah.
And I think it would be nice for them to slow it down and spend a little bit more time in these exotic locations instead of just like, oh yeah, we're in the Underdark and it's like this massive underground like complex, and they just blaze through it. And it's like we spent no time there. Like that's crazy.
Yep.
Um, I will say as well that now that they have the helmet, they name dropped the Cult of the Dragon, which is another influential, like powerful evil faction within Dungeons and Dragons. And maybe if they didn't want to continue the Wizards of Thay like storyline, which I think they're going to,
Yeah.
but if they didn't want to, they could go the way with the Cult of the Dragon, which I think the Cult of the Dragon is really cool. Like this demonic satanic cult worshipping Tiamat, who is the evil goddess of dragons, who is Bahamut's like antithesis, which would mean that if they do the thing, and Simon is actually the descendant of Elminster, right? He is the cult of the dragons, the deity that the cult of the dragon worships. He is a descendant of her ultimate nemesis, and he's now in possession of the helmet that they want.
Yep.
So there's a lot of potential there for
A story. Yeah.
yeah, for stuff to happen.
Yeah, maybe like a Simon Doric centric story. It doesn't even have to be like one central figure. You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
I can see
Yep.
that. I pretty much, in terms of like returning people, I pretty much want all of the main cast to return, even Forge Fitzwilliams, because I can see him kind
Yeah.
of being like a recurring villain to the party.
Yep.
I think they set him up that way. Like he's a dick, but I don't know if he's maniacal in any way.
Yes. Yes.
Because I mean, he still kind of cared about Kira until he put a knife to her neck.
Yeah. And maybe you could even have like the Captain Barbosa from Pirates of the Caribbean, right? You could maybe even have it kind of be like that, where like
Yeah,
he's the villain, but he comes back and he's like kind of on their side, but you never really trust him, right?
yeah, yeah. A lot of potential. They have great foundation here to build upon.
Overall, as I began talking about it, I do actually kind of enjoy this movie. Like it's still, I don't know, it's not a great movie like at all. Like it's not great, but I enjoyed it, and to be fair, a lot of my enjoyment is derived out of the fact that like there's so many nods to the the D&D community that I think it helped me to enjoy the movie more. And I think that if I didn't know any of that, I don't think I would have enjoyed it as much, but I did. Like even down to the fact that each of the characters, I could name you their race, their class, and even their subclass,
Mm.
based off of just what we see in the movie. And it's like there's a lot of things like that I'm just like, yeah, it's really like it feels like it's a part of that world. I think you just gotta narrow it down, like stop dropping so much stuff, stop introducing all of these factions and ideas into the movie, like keep it simple. Another thing, in the sequel, you gotta give them a line where they say you can certainly try. I like, it has to be done, because that is the every DM ever, right? The party's like, hey, can we like try this absolutely outrageous crazy idea? DM's always like, well, can certainly try, right? It's
Yeah,
like that. I need that line. If that happens, I will jump up out of my seat in the theater and I will start applauding. Like it would be excellent.
yeah,
So I I need that. But I just hope that they uh even though I enjoy so much of the things that are like super D&D about this movie, I hope that they scale it back a little bit and make it more digestible for the average person. Because ultimately, I think that this should be an opportunity for people to become interested in the game and understand the stories that D&D is for, right? Like D&D is uh, at its core, it's a avenue for telling improvised stories in like a collaborative setting, and that's really cool.
yep,
And yeah, so if you're out there and you liked this movie, go ahead and give D&D a shot. Like there's tons of resources online where you can try it, and you look for a group, and it's good fun. And it's a really cool thing. But yeah, that's about all I have to say about the movie. And if you didn't like the movie, know that the game is like way better. Real brief aside as well, when it comes to the movie and like D&D media, we mentioned it a little bit earlier. The Critical Role Vox Machina animated series on Amazon is very, very good.
Yep.
It is an animated series that is based off of an actual game of D&D that they played, and you can watch the actual game as well. It's Critical Role. It's the first campaign. Critical Role good. All right. So thanks for playing some one-on-one D&D with me, Rick.
Yeah, man, no problem. I'm always down for D&D.
Okay, so we're going to start our adventure as you walk into a dimly lit room. And what you can see in this room is there's a table with what appear to be microphones. And on either side of this table, there are two director's chairs. It looks like someone was here recently, potentially recording a podcast. But the room is very dimly illuminated. So can you go ahead and roll a perception check for me?
All right. Shit, I got a 3.
That's not gonna be enough for you to see him.
See who?
Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Hey guys.
What? What? Oh shit! Why is Jean-Claude Van Damme? He's literally beating me the fuck up. Fuck.
You didn't see him. You failed your perception check.